Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
First story. In my college days, I had a friend who hit the jackpot, a Visa lottery win that allowed him to move to the United States. His success ignited a fire within me. My wife and I, both in our mid-20s, had always fantasized about finding better opportunities in the US. Despite the slim chances, I clung to hope, while my wife remained skeptical. We held college degrees but struggled to secure decent jobs in our home country. Determined, I scraped together some savings and opened a small shop. My wife and I became shop owners, barely covering the rent. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived, the lottery visa. Our hearts swelled with excitement and hope. In my mind, the US was a rosy paradise where our struggles would vanish. We were ready to live the classic American dream. But there was a catch: we needed a sponsor. Our options narrowed down to my old classmate in Georgia and a childhood neighbor. Although not close, the neighbor stepped up, generously sharing his two-bedroom apartment in New York. Reality hit hard when we arrived in the United States. The dream blurred as we faced challenges. The neighbor, our supposed helper, evicted us after just 2 months. We hustled to find jobs and a place to stay. His cramped apartment barely accommodated his own family, let alone us. Still, I felt gratitude. We were in the land of opportunity. The rat race consumed us. Extra hours became our lifeline. My wife, pregnant, switched to part-time work, while I juggled 2 jobs. I even bought a motorcycle to escape the bus commute. When our baby arrived, my wife became a dedicated stay-at-home mom, managing household chores and cooking. Despite the rocky start, we found our footing within 13 months. We secured our own apartment, and I had my motorcycle while my wife drove a car. I worked as a machine operator at a local mill shop. Life was decent, but I sensed it could be better. Higher education beckoned. Our bachelor's degrees from our home country were worthless here unless we pursued an MBA, a 2-year degree. So, we devised a plan: my wife would study while I worked. Once she landed a job, we'd switch roles. A solid plan, right? Not quite. As my wife began her MBA program, I kept in touch with a college buddy in Georgia. He'd become a successful real estate agent, flipping houses and thriving. Our journey was far from over, but we were determined to turn dreams into reality. He persistently urged me to move elsewhere, citing the reasonable cost of living and abundant opportunities. But I resisted, too comfortable in our familiar New York surroundings. That complacency turned out to be one of our greatest mistakes. Back then, I was earning more money than ever before. Our families back home benefited from my hard work. My wife, driven and intelligent, recognized that an MBA could open doors to a better future. We seemed to be on the same page. While she attended evening classes, I took charge of our baby at home. We even had a neighbor with young kids, and we exchanged babysitting favors. Our journey was filled with challenges, yet our shared love and nurtured dreams kept us moving forward. After 3 years, my wife's efforts paid off. She earned her MBA and secured a well-paying job at a logistics company. The future looked promising. Everything fell into place just as we had hoped. We envisioned our daughter growing up in a world where hard work led to tangible rewards. But then, my wife's priorities shifted. The initial months of her new job were blissful. I left my own job to be a stay-at-home dad, diligently completing my MBA program. Her work hours were reasonable, leaving ample family time. However, she surprised me by suggesting we have another baby. I wanted to wait until I finished school, but she felt time slipping away. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we began trying. Within 2 months, something changed. She worked longer hours, socialized with colleagues and new friends, and got caught up in the American lifestyle. Her high-flying career led her astray, and she lost sight of our roots. She'd stroll in at 8 p.m., seemingly forgetting our waiting family. When I questioned her, she'd become defensive, as if she'd forgotten who got us into this situation. Rather than appreciating my sacrifices, she turned selfish. I'd put our family first, from our home country to our current life, but she couldn't resist every little opportunity. Consumed by the American way of life, she argued and disrespected me, echoing the behavior of those American women we saw on TV. As she earned more money, she stayed late at work, hanging out with friends and coworkers. Meanwhile, I juggled studies, household chores, cooking, and baby care. I even sought side gigs to avoid asking her for money. Despite my efforts, she found fault in everything, and I tiptoed around her constantly. Our marriage suffered. Arguments escalated, and she stooped to the lowest levels, mocking my lack of an American job or college degree. It was as if she'd transformed into a different person, one who hurt me with her words. The wounds ran deep. Back when we struggled, we shared smiles and cherished moments. Now, with success on the horizon, I found myself drowning in resentment and disappointment. The American dream had come at a cost we hadn't anticipated. Driven by the need to contribute financially and escape the relentless verbal attacks, I embarked on a secret journey to find alternative sources of income. As our neighbor watched over our daughter, I slipped into the role of a food delivery driver. Armed with the Uber Eats app and my trusty motorcycle, I zipped around the city, ferrying meals to hungry customers during stolen moments. The extra cash provided pocket money and covered small expenses at home, including perishables for our baby. My wife never questioned the source of this newfound money. Perhaps she assumed it was a stroke of luck or an unexpected windfall. But behind the scenes, I juggled responsibilities, covering everything from diapers to college expenses that the loan didn't handle. Our daughter's needs took precedence, and I had no choice but to take up the food delivery gig. Our once happy relationship morphed into a battleground of trivial disputes. Days blurred into months, and my wife's work hours stretched until 8 p.m. She immersed herself in friendships and coworker camaraderie, leaving me to wonder if she'd already given up on us. The shouting matches escalated, and I stopped asking about her whereabouts, tired of the constant fights. During heated arguments, she threatened to involve the police, accusing me of neglecting our child. Despite her insults, I never raised a hand against her. But her words cut deep, undermining my role as a caregiver. She insisted she could afford daycare without my presence, even though I'd never been violent. Her transformation puzzled me. It was as if her American friends fed her toxic lines, pushing her further away. I struggled to comprehend the changes in my wife, feeling utterly clueless about our crumbling marriage. Then, on a fateful evening, much like any other since I started food deliveries, I stood at a customer's door. The clock read 5:30 p.m., and I hoped my usual charm might earn me a tip. But when the door swung open, shock and disbelief flooded my senses. There stood my wife, wrapped in a white towel, fresh from the shower. Her presence in this unfamiliar apartment left me speechless. Before I could question her, panic seized her. Slammed the door shut, leaving me bewildered. Fueled by a rush of emotions, I kicked the door open, accidentally striking her face. The impact revealed more than her bruised forehead, it unveiled her vulnerability. She wore nothing beneath that towel, and suddenly, our broken marriage seemed even more fragile. In the blink of an eye, my life unraveled. It was a sweltering afternoon, and I stood at the threshold of a stranger's house, my heart pounding. The woman who had just yelled for the owner was my wife, but she wasn't here for a friendly visit. No, she was seeking her secret lover, the man who emerged, bewildered, clad only in shorts. My wife's fear was palpable as she darted behind him, anticipating my wrath. I struggled to explain that we were bound by marriage, that our lives were intertwined, and that our baby girl depended on us. But he brushed me off, pushing me out of his apartment. Frustration ignited into a brawl, a chaotic dance of anger and desperation. Picture it, me, grappling with this half-naked stranger, while my wife screamed at the top of her lungs. The neighbors must have thought a war had erupted. Someone dialed the police, and soon I found myself in handcuffs, cooling off in the back of a patrol car. My life teetered on the edge, deportation loomed like a dark cloud. As they questioned my wife and her lover, I poured out my heart to a sympathetic officer. He listened, perhaps recognizing the familiar tale of love gone awry. His advice was stark: cut ties, seek legal counsel, and find shelter. My wife, it seemed, harbored an intense hatred for me. How had we reached this point? Where had I gone so wrong? The police car vanished, leaving me with the indelible marks of the handcuffs etched into my skin. A stark reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything for the sake of love. Alone in this foreign land, I dialed my friend in Georgia, a lifeline. He cautioned me, staying would endanger our daughter. Reality stared me down, unyielding. My wife, once my confidant, now aimed to wreck my life. Anger and heartbreak wrestled within me. Her betrayal weighed heavy, threatening to crush my spirit. The officer's empathy lingered, the only person who seemed to care. With a heavy heart, I boarded a bus, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage. Back home, my wife awaited me, applying an ice pack to her forehead, ready for confrontation. Accusations flew, but I held my ground. She didn't comprehend the depth of her actions. So, I chose the gray rock approach, treating her like an inconspicuous speck on the wall. The battle had shifted, survival became my sole focus. The bedroom held the weight of my decision. As I gathered my belongings, she peeked through the partially opened door, her eyes wide with disbelief. My wife couldn't fathom that I was about to walk away from it all. The idea of my departure was beyond her imagination. Tears blurred my vision as I stowed away the essentials. I needed to bid my daughter farewell. Shame and emotional fatigue prevented me from meeting my wife's gaze. Dragging my luggage toward the exit, it hit her, the realization that I was truly leaving. Apologies flowed, but they were too little, too late. I didn't turn back. Sadly, that marked the last time I saw my daughter for almost 2 years. Loaded up with possessions, I straddled my bike and rode south. No discounted bus ticket for me, I was bound for Georgia, pedaling my way to freedom. The stifling air of New York gave way to a refreshing breeze as I arrived at my friend's place. His warm welcome lifted my spirits. He offered his couch as a sanctuary. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my wife, questions, apologies, and pleas. I texted her, resolute, I would never see her again. She turned to my family, hoping they'd sway me. But my friend had other plans. Real estate beckoned. I got licensed, diving into wholesaling and flipping houses. It became my gold mine, ringing up profits fivefold what an MBA might yield. And then, captivated by another realtor, our connection blossomed. But marriage? No, I'd sworn off that arena. She understood my history, and mutual understanding smoothed our path. Christmas came, and I whisked my girlfriend to New York. The plan, time with my daughter and the official start of divorce proceedings with my estranged wife. I reached out to her, breaking over a year of silence. Her shock was palpable when I visited. But I kept my serious girlfriend under wraps. Reuniting with my daughter was the highlight. They still occupied the same apartment. My soon-to-be ex-wife assumed reconciliation, but I remained unfazed. She'd once aimed to have me in cuffs, caught in her affair. Clarifying my purpose, I explained that my trip centered on our daughter and finalizing our divorce. As I walked away, I couldn't forget that moment, the stark realization that my life had shifted from betrayal to liberation. Keeping quiet about my girlfriend was a deliberate choice. I didn't want complications affecting the custody arrangements for my daughter. At present, I intend to relish my time in New York with her before journeying back to Georgia alongside my girlfriend. My aspiration is that once the divorce is legally settled, my daughter will find her way to Georgia more frequently for visits. Second story. Last week, I discovered that my 24-year-old fiancée cheated on me with her boss. The guy, perhaps in his mid-40s, is married and has 3 kids. This all unfolded last November during a work trip when they were out of town. Shockingly, they got together 3 times. How did I find out? Her boss's wife messaged me on Facebook and spilled the beans. She even showed me messages and emails where they discussed their affair in detail. They laughed about it, but in the same messages, she'd tell him she loves me and that they need to keep this secret. The boss's wife, whom I've met and found nice at company events, understandably went ballistic and heartbroken. She's preparing to serve him with divorce papers tomorrow and plans to send a polite email to their HR department. As I sit here typing this on my phone, my fiancé is blissfully unaware, sitting on the couch across the room, planning a honeymoon for a wedding that won't happen. I have no sympathy left for her since my own situation fell apart just last week. Going through those texts and emails feels like someone stabbing me in the heart with a knife. 3 years down the drain, but at least I found out before tying the knot. Tomorrow, I've taken a day off. Once she heads to work, I'll gather all her stuff, pack it up, and leave it by the door. I'll also figure out if I can get any of the money I spent on the wedding refunded. The October wedding won't happen, and when she returns from work, I'll kick her out of my apartment and my life. I considered posting screenshots on her Facebook, but my sister talked me out of it. I've also thought about calling her parents. They're good folks, and I'll miss her family, they've treated me like one of their own. But I've made up my mind, she can explain herself to them. At this point, all I want is for her to get out of my life so I can figure out what the heck I'm going to do next. Update, holy smokes. The response stirred up a bomb. My phone went bonkers with her calls. I dialed my sister right away to spill the beans. She's here now, keeping me company. I also had a tough convo with my ex's mom. Despite being upset, she seemed to understand why I feel this way. Maybe her suggestion to help my ex gather her stuff isn't a bad idea after all. I urgently messaged my closest friends, filling them in on the chaos. Their responses flooded my phone, but I promised to catch up later. Right now, I'm drowning in this emotional storm. My ex's voicemail echoed her tearful plea for a conversation. I called, but she didn't answer. Texts flew back and forth until she rang me back in a flash. Her rehearsed apology fell flat. Why did I involve her mom? She asked. I lost my cool, reminding her of the embarrassment, getting tested for STDs because my fiancé cheated. She needs to pick up her stuff this afternoon, we're officially done. Her heartlessness stung. She and her lover mocked me and his wife. The poor woman didn't deserve this, and neither did I. Her boss's status doesn't excuse her actions, her texts revealed her willingness. The office buzzed about their escapade, but sympathy eluded me. As she wraps up her HR chat, she'll head here. I hope for minimal drama. My sister will be present, and maybe her mom too, the landlord changing the locks. My mind races, but I'm emotionally wiped out. Update, she's gone. Her mom, best friend, and my sister witnessed her quiet departure. No shouting, no arguments. Tears flowed predictably. Her mom apologized, devastated by her daughter's behavior. Yes, her lover is married. The engagement ring, once a symbol of love, now lies forgotten on my coffee table. I won't look at it. Tomorrow, she'll return for the rest with her dad. My defeat is palpable, sleep beckons as I navigate this shattered reality. My sister, in a fit of rage, expressed her desire to yank the girl's hair out by the roots. These were her words, not mine. But right now, I feel utterly defeated by it all. All I want is to lie down and find solace in sleep. Third story. My wife, a 46-year-old woman, held strong connections with the women in our neighborhood. She possessed an innate talent for socializing and was always on the move. Whenever she mentioned a meeting or a social event, I took her word for it without question. Over 8 years, she orchestrated numerous gatherings, becoming the town's most reliable source of gossip. Amid nurturing more than 40 friendships, there was another woman named Virginia. Virginia, like my wife, was married and had 2 young children. I suspected that my wife secretly envied the lifestyle Virginia enjoyed. Their family seemed to revel in a bit more luxury, even though we managed to pay our bills. One fateful day, Samantha, a different friend of my wife, called me. She expressed concern because she hadn't seen my wife around lately. This unsettled me deeply, as my wife had always been out with her friends at least twice a week. However, she never shared specifics with me. I asked Samantha if my wife had been attending the usual gatherings. Samantha confirmed this but added that she wasn't the only one noticing my wife's absence. According to her, my wife had disappeared off the radar. She was in the midst of organizing a charity 5K event to raise funds for families in need when she suddenly went silent. Apparently, she had mentioned needing some space, but it had been approximately 2 months since anyone had seen her in person. Genuine worry spread among her close companions. Moments before my wife walked into the room, I hung up with Samantha. She was elegantly dressed, sporting dangling earrings and a form-fitting dress. Her curls bounced with each step, and her heels echoed as she informed me that she was heading out for a grand dinner with friends, celebrating Samantha's birthday, the same Samantha who had just expressed concern for my wife's safety. Something felt terribly amiss. My thoughts raced, and my heart thudded. I couldn't let her walk away unquestioned. Gently taking her hand, I planted a kiss on it and told her I'd drive her to the dinner. I wanted more time to appreciate her. She grew anxious, insisting it wasn't necessary, but I persisted, perhaps more than I should have, making the situation awkward. As we got into the car, she gave me directions to the dinner. It was being hosted by Virginia, the same close friend I'd heard of before, the one who was also married. A recent Facebook post by Virginia triggered a memory. She discussed her upcoming week-long trip, and what stood out was my wife's comment, wishing her a safe journey. All of this transpired just 3 days ago. My heart raced, palms sweaty, and my grip tightened on the steering wheel. I was clueless about how to navigate this impending situation. My wife's voice cut through, questioning my insistence on driving her when I'd need to rush back home to catch the kickoff. I saw right through her game. She intended to create a scenario where I wouldn't have time to accompany her to the door or delve deeper into her deceit. Bantering with her, I suggested that I didn't need to catch it since one of the players would. She appeared uneasy, hesitating before admitting that she felt bad I couldn't join because it was a women-only dinner. Her words sounded far too suspicious. The car came to a halt, and my wife's expression shifted from surprise to horror as I shut off the engine and unbuckled my seatbelt. She leaned in for a kiss, casually mentioning that I should pick her up at 9. But to her astonishment, I stepped out of the car and walked beside her. Her puzzled look couldn't deter me. I wanted to be the gentleman and walk her to the door. Her rejection was deliberate, yet I grinned. As we approached the front door, her nerves became palpable. I knocked firmly, and she froze, mouth agape. Inside, AP swung the door open, clad in a plush robe adorned with his initials. Initially pleased, his expression quickly shifted to nervousness. In a clear voice, I greeted him and stepped inside, explaining that I was escorting my wife to the women's-only dinner hosted by Virginia. Curiously, I inquired about the absence of all the women, but neither of them budged. I playfully teased my wife for her supposed tardiness, even though she was early. As they stood there, jaws hanging open, I drew their attention to the dinner table set for two, complete with filled wine glasses. My perplexed expression added to their discomfort. AP's face turned a shade of purple, but he remained tight-lipped. My wife mentioned that the other girls were running late, and I responded aloud, questioning Virginia's whereabouts. A silence hung in the air before my wife suggested that Virginia might have dashed to the store. AP's annoyance was evident. He declared their charade over, and I saw through their deception. Distressed, my wife's composure wavered. AP ordered us out of his house, almost pushing us through the front door. Just before he closed it, I dropped a hint that it wouldn't bode well if someone were to tell his wife about the situation. He locked eyes with me, questioning my intentions. I made it clear that I wanted evidence of his affair with my wife for the divorce proceedings. Reluctantly, he agreed. When my wife heard his admission, she lost her composure, snatched the keys, and drove off in a hurry. Back home, I received the proof from AP, messages and images that left no room for doubt. They had been intimately involved numerous times. Initially, I planned to reveal everything to Virginia after finalizing the divorce, but patience wore thin. Virginia retaliated against my wife, slashing her car tires and etching an unkind word onto the hood. AP and my wife divorced, and she was ostracized from the community. Now, at 46, she's left with nothing, no money, no friends, and no husband.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.